So I remember probably every detail because it's ingrained in my mind. First of all, I was bringing humanitarian aid to the Kosovo region. And then as the war escalated, they closed the borders. And the only way to reach the refugees was from northern Albania because thousands of people were fleeing from the fighting. So we took about 10 trucks filled with humanitarian aid, delivered the aid to the refugees, and then I was asked if I would take some of the pediatric medicines across the border to Unic in Kosovo. And the only way in at that time was across the mountains. So I went on foot, and the medicines were carried on the back of a mule. We had to go across at night. I had a guide, but it was pitch dark and we had to run to avoid Serb patrols. I fell. I tore the ligaments in my ankle in a stream, crossing a stream. It was truly, people say everything's a nightmare, but this really was a nightmare, and I still think about it now. And when we arrived in Unic, delivered the medicines, then I was asked to go to some of the outlying villages, Nets and Smolica. And there we had to get along the street. I had a couple of people, local people, who were helping me, including someone who is now a minister in the parliament. Anyway, they took me to these buildings that had been shelled just a few days earlier. And there we found a lot of children living in damp, dark cellars with their mothers, sheltering beneath the rubble of their homes. And some of them were injured and some were sick. And a little girl of 3 was going blind. And they asked me if I could take them out so they could get medical treatment, because the area was now surrounded and they were expecting an offensive any day. The only way out, of course, was back across the mountains. So we set off the next morning and we walked from dawn till dusk. Some of the children were carried on mules because they were unable to walk. Mothers carried babies. It was difficult, a very difficult journey, and the worry as well, because I had responsibility for 24 women and children. And finally we made it to the top, and we sat down at the edge of the forest so they could rest, so the mothers could feed the babies and the children could eat some biscuits, drink some water, and nobody was worried. And then suddenly we heard the sound of machine gun fire and grenades were exploding, and everybody raced back into the forest. But as I turned, I saw one woman, Hannah, with 2 of her children, a baby called Dorantina, who was 16 months old, and a 10-year-old called Drita. They were trapped in the crossfire. So I managed to reach them, and we stayed there covering the children for over an hour. And there was a helicopter gunship overhead. There were explosions, and I really thought they were going to be killed. And the baby was screaming all the time, "Mama, Mama." She was so frightened. And finally I thought they're just going to die here beneath this tree if I don't do something. So when the helicopter moved away and it was quieter, I called out, "Nema Putsa, stop shooting. It's women and children." And like a miracle, everything went quiet, and a voice in English said, "Come out with your hands in the air." So I did. And he told me, "It's fine. You can tell the others to come." So I called to Hannah to come out with the children, and they took care of them. They put blankets around their shoulders. They gave the children food and sweets. And then I was marched back into the forest by one of the soldiers. He said, "Please tell the others to come." And I saw they were taking care of them, so I wasn't worried. And I called out, "It's fine, you can come out now, come on." Nothing, not a sound. So I called again, nothing. And then he took his gun and he jabbed me with his gun and he said, "Tell them if they don't come out right now, I'm going to shoot you." And instead of being frightened, I was so angry because it was a long journey. My ankle hurt. The children, the screaming, the trauma of everything and the fear for where were the others. And I called out, "Run, run as fast as you can." And then he marched me back up. We were taken overland to Jakova, to the police station. We were questioned for about 3 days. Hannah and the children were released. And I was told by a judge that I had to serve 30 days in prison for crossing the border without a visa. But I was released, I was pardoned and released 2 weeks later. And I heard that all the families had made it safely across the border. So I heard that the families had made it safely across the border. So on my release, I immediately went to northern Albania and I found them all and more that needed help. But while I was trying to arrange medical treatment abroad for them, I was shot. But I was okay, and I'm here now, and I've been to many wars since then, during the last 25 years, and I've seen a lot of suffering, but I've never forgotten the mountain, and I've never forgotten those children, and I've never forgotten the baby screaming, "Mama, Mama," in fear, and that sound still haunts my dreams. The bullet passed straight through my leg, so it wasn't, it hurt, but it wasn't too bad. It's just that the president of Albania kindly sent his Minister of Health to evacuate me to Tirana, because we were in Bayram Suri at that time, near Tropoje. And I said to him, "Can we take the children?" And he said, "No, it's just a small helicopter." So, of course, I couldn't leave them. So I had to stay. And I was there, I think, another 2 or 3 months with this horrible wound in my leg. It wasn't pleasant, but in the end, we managed to get all the families abroad. And the little girl who was going blind, Marigona, I managed to get permission to bring her to the UK. She came for 2 weeks. She had surgery, and then she was able to see her parents properly for the first time when she returned. I suppose when I saw them all, when I went to Albania after being in the prison, and I saw them all, they were waiting for me in a restaurant. I couldn't believe it. It was so different. You know, I'd seen them on the mountain. I'd seen them in the middle of this dangerous place. I'd seen them being shot at. I'd seen them running. And now they were sitting, they were eating spaghetti, and the kids were having milkshakes. It was incredible.